new director that's going to handle day-to-day operation, Mr. Dan Hartman. So if you could please help me in welcoming Matt Cook.
Cheryl, I'd like to thank you and the Business Alliance as well for hosting this. You and I have had an opportunity to sit down and discuss some of the ins and outs of 1284, and it's certainly not a perfect piece of legislation. I think we can all agree on that on the front end. The reality is, though, that it's going to take a partnership for this to move forward, and I'm hopeful that we can create those partnerships through meetings like this in the future. I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you a little bit about Dan Hartman, seated to my left. Dan is currently the director of the Division of Racing Events for the state of Colorado. He and I have worked together since 1991. And I'm very honored and pleasure to tell you that he was recently appointed as the chairman of RCI International, Racing Commissioners International, which is an international racing affiliation organization. So Dan now is involved on a national basis and is very seated in setting model rules and regulatory processes for that industry. So he's very intimate with the regulatory processes. He and I have had a partnership, like I said, since 1991. We work very well together. But due to his other commitments, I'm not able to hand this to him today, but he will be your guy at some point in the future, probably around the end of the year, somewhere in that time frame. And I'm very excited, very fortunate to have Dan on my team. We haven't gotten this far, at least on the regulatory side, without the efforts of Dan and his team. So thank you, Dan. This is, if my counting is accurate, and I can do it on one hand, this is my third meeting so far of this sort in the past few weeks. I'm very excited about being chosen to begin the regulatory process for this industry in Colorado. I've been in the regulatory business for some 30 years here in Colorado. I was also involved with national organizations as well. Did some lobbying in D.C. and those kind of things. So I'm politically astute. I understand what it takes to implement new processes, new rules, new laws, and I know what it takes to communicate with people. And my commitment to you is, first of all, that you will always get fair, honest, and faithful communication from the Department of Revenue, from Dan and I specifically, as it relates to any of your questions as we move forward in this industry. I have spent at-length time, I can't tell you the number of hours, trying to return emails and phone calls. I spent 24 hours in Grand Junction earlier this week, only to return to 108 emails, and my telephone queue was full. And I diligently spent until about 10:30 at night returning those emails. You have a right to be informed, and it's through these forums, again, the email communications, telephone calls, that we can make that happen. There's a ton of really bad information out there, I'm really sorry to say. But there's a few things coming, I think, that will help that. Certainly these kinds of forums will help solve some of those problems. We hope to have a website up. If you go to the Department of Revenue under the enforcement line of business, within the next week, you should see a website for the Medical Marijuana Enforcement Division. I hope to do a number of frequently asked questions and information bulletins and those kinds of things. Thankfully, the Push magazine has offered to publish a writing for me once a month, and I will reach out to the industry as well to give them the insight as to where we're going, to keep you involved with the regulatory process as we move forward. If you have a pen and paper handy, I'm going to give you a telephone number. It's a hotline that we use within the department. You're certainly welcome to call Dan and I directly, but this will be the number of the division in the future. And it's area code 303-205-8421. And if you're not familiar with what those numbers stand for on a telephone, it's THC1. Rob talked about being very open-minded and very creative, and how the industry was full of very open-minded and creative people. Dan and I think, are fairly open-minded and creative as well. I have had the sincere privilege of meeting with many of you in this room over the past several months. I've got to know a lot of you and a lot of really what you bring to the table for this industry. And I'll give you up front that I don't pretend to know your industry. I don't know your industry. I know a little bit about marijuana from my regulatory charge very serious, and the only way it works is if we partner together to make it happen. I get that, and I know what the Constitution's about, I know what House Bill 1284 is about, and my commitment to you is that I will do whatever I can within my power to ensure that I create a fair regulatory scheme that ensures patient access across the state of Colorado. That's it. I wanted to touch a little bit about cash fund fees. There's, again, rumors out there, and then I want to talk a little bit about the timelines that are imminent, and then a little bit about the rulemaking process and really what that involves. State government, there's really two ways to fund or get an appropriation to do business. One is through the general fund, which is virtually where all tax dollars that come in through income taxes and the like, sales taxes, they go into this pool of money. And virtually every entity in state government, except the cash fund or an enterprise, has to compete for those dollars. And it's no secret to what's happening in the economy. We've all been a victim of it one way or another over the past couple of years. Revenues are shrinking. The regulatory challenges are still there. They exist. In fact, in some arenas, regulatory challenges are elevated. When times get tough, people get a little more creative. They have to survive. It's basic business. I understand that. But nonetheless, this division and through HB 1284 is going to be funded through something called a cash fund. And I'm again going to use Dan's analogy. A cash fund, at least for this year, the division will be building a house. At this point, I have no pens, no pencils, no paper, no employees, no cars, no computers, no equipment, nothing to start a business. And if you've ever built a house, you know it costs a little more to have a house built on the front end. Once you get the house built, assuming it's paid for it, you may or may not have a mortgage attached to it, but you have to update it, maintain it. You'll paint it once a year. You'll have the vacuum run it daily, those kind of things. It's a lot cheaper to do that once you get your house built. The cash fund is no different from that. And unfortunately, from my standpoint, your standpoint as well, I think, the bill specifically prohibits me from using one general fund dollar to run this division. It must all be a cash fund appropriation. And really what a cash fund is the industry that's regulated pays for the enforcement efforts. I committed to the legislature on the front end that I would not be overstaffed, that I would do things in a fiscally responsible manner, and that's also my commitment to you. I will tell you that my plan is at this point to hire one investigative person for every 10 dispensaries, infused products manufacturers, or on-premise grows out there, and I will hold that. I will hold true to that. I will have licensing staff and obviously compliance people and some auditors, and I have some processes, I think, through the regulatory process, which will make all of our jobs a lot easier. The example I gave at the Push seminar last week, I understand that visiting multiple grows in one day, I have the ability to transport bugs from one grow to the other, and that can be devastating to your crop. I don't want to be in the grows, and I don't want to be responsible for that devastation. So there are tools available, video systems, cameras, that we can work together to create through the rulemaking process, implement them, and I will have no need to come physically to your grow. I'm sure you don't want me in your business on a daily basis. I'm actually a pretty nice guy, but I get it, it's business. Okay? Back to the cash fund. As I said, I really don't have the ability to use any general fund dollars this year at all. And so I have to get enough money in that fund to build a house. And the legislature has said you can collect enough money, and you can also collect a reserve in case the economy drops, licensees drop, whatever the case may be, of 16.5% of whatever your appropriation is. We have, at this point, come out with a baseline for application fees, and I'll tell you about the timelines associated with them in a moment, but the way that it's structured currently for dispensaries, dispensary 0 to 300 patients on August 1st will have to file an application fee of $7,500. A dispensary with 301 to 500 patients will have to pay $12,500, and if you have 501 or more patients, it's $18,000.